This episode was recorded in two parts on September 17th and 19th, 2025. On September 10th, Charlie Kirk was assassinated while speaking to a crowd of people on the campus of Utah Valley University. He was a prominent conservative voice that helped rally especially young people to the Republican Party. In the wake of his death, people have been fired for comments posted to social media. TV programs have been yanked off the air, and everyday Americans are having an intense conversation about one of our founding principles, the right to free speech. In this episode of We The Palmetto, we do the same. I'm speaking to a Republican and a Democrat to talk about just how far the right to free speech goes and whether or not there's a path forward to cool the political temperature in this country and come together. We talked to Lowcountry voters. Trump was in true campaign form. Voting is officially underway. Joe Biden spoke here in the heart of downtown.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Joining me now is Representative Jordan Pace. He's the chair of the Freedom Caucus here in South Carolina. First off, thanks for coming in for what I expect is probably going to be an important conversation that kind of everybody is having right now around dinner tables Certainly. And at various
everywhere
meetings and stuff.
Right.
Yeah. We're talking about the aftermath of the shooting of Charlie Kirk, and we're talking guns, we're talking freedom of speech, we're talking about political violence here. But first, I want you to kind of just take me back to, last week. Where were you? What were you doing when you got the news that Charlie had been shot?
I was actually taking care of my two girls. I have two daughters that are almost exactly the same age as Charlie's. And so my wife had just left to go coach. She coaches a cross-country team. She just left, so it was just me and my girls, and I saw the video, and it was heartbreaking. Yeah.
I want to get your assessment of where we are right now. We've seen a lot of speech online. There's a lot of debate happening. There is, the alleged shooter is in custody at bond hearing the other day, and now we're talking about it. What is your assessment of the current situation?
Yeah, well, I mean, there has been an ongoing issue, and I think we may have even talked about this in the past about the trend of shootings, but seem to be fairly targeted toward conservative Christians, whatever, in the last several years, and that seems to fit the same pattern. And it's really not just here. I mean, we saw it in Nigeria even about the same time as Charlie got shot, and there was a school in Colorado got shot. There was like a whole church of Christians in Nigeria got destroyed with them in it. From my perspective, as a guy who studies history, particularly the last several hundred years of history, there's a pendulum swing from time to time of ideologies that when they don't get what they want, either at the ballot box or in the course of debate, public debate, they skew toward violence. And my fear is that that's where we're heading, and that, I mean, this happened in 1911 to 1917 in Russia. This happened in the late 1700s in France, even to some extent in the early 1800s in England with the Charterists and things like that. And certainly in the 1840s, 1848 in several countries around Europe and Germany and in Austria and places in Italy. So that's kind of my grander concern is that the place that we're heading, and if it is, how do we cut that off? How do we stop that? How do we not go to a place where that's common, where political violence is the go-to?
Well, how do we get to this point? I mean, who's to blame for ratcheting up the political temperature in this country? And to some extent, do both sides, both Republicans and Democrats, liberals and conservatives, share some level of blame for using heated rhetoric?
I don't think so, because there's a difference between, and this probably will lead into what is freedom of speech and people losing their jobs and things like that. There is a difference between heated rhetoric of these people are causing these problems and these policies are going to be these problems, even maybe more so than I would use personally, versus this guy's Hitler, or these people are Nazis, or like being that level of specific, because what do you do with Hitler? What did we do with the Nazis? We destroyed them. We invaded and like sent armies in and killed them. There is a delineated difference between those things. So yeah, some people on the right have used stronger language maybe than I would use about policies. Some of these are true. I mean, it is true that 70 million babies have been killed by abortion. I mean, that's an accurate statement. And the people, and that from the perspective of Christians and conservatives, that's murder. But no one on the right is saying, go commit terroristic activities on those places. Versus the left for the last 10 years has said, Donald Trump is Hitler. His followers are Nazis. They're fascists. What do you do with fascists? Punch the fascist. We saw that with the George Floyd stuff and the whole Antifa thing. There is a difference, and I don't think they're equally culpable.
Let's talk about free speech, though, because this is something that Charlie himself was very supportive of. Yeah. Huge supporter of the First Amendment. Say what you like. However, in recent days, we've seen a lot of statements being put online by both allies and adversaries of Charlie's, which have now led to people across the country getting fired. Talk to me a little bit about your push and the push from plenty of other politicians in South Carolina to address the situation at Clemson, where you had a handful of employees who made statements online and have now been fired. Talk about that situation and where all this leads.
Yeah, so it started actually with a high school social studies teacher in Greenville. I think is where it kind of clicked off to start right the day of the shooting. I think this individual made pretty heinous statements celebrating. I don't remember what exact words were, but literally celebrating, and said this is a good thing that this guy got killed. And it was a high school teacher. So we kind of got word of that. The Freedom Caucus did. Our upstate guys in Greenville started making phone calls to school board members, let them know very quickly, like, this is going to be a problem. And that teacher was terminated for cause, rightful cause. Like, I taught high school for 3 years. It would be wildly unacceptable for me to get in front of kids and say those things. And the thought process, like, look, if he's saying this out in public, he's definitely saying it to the kids. That's not a good influence. We don't want someone encouraging children to think that political violence is not only acceptable, but good. Like that's wildly unacceptable. Now, look, he shouldn't go to jail for it. And that's the difference. And going back to education, we have a huge deficit in understanding of, like, what does freedom of speech mean? Like, what does the First Amendment protect us from? It protects us from being jailed, like
protects you from the government, right? We're talking
government,
about freedom of speech, not freedom from consequences.
Correct. Yes. Okay. Like, the sheriff's office isn't going to show up at that guy's house and said, you said these bad things. You're going to go to jail. That's what the First Amendment protects us from. It doesn't protect you from consequences, particularly if you're getting paid by taxpayer money to educate kids. So skip to Clemson. Yeah, we have a professor jumped on there and said, today's a great day. The world is a better place without Charlie Kirk in it. And the college Republicans on campus, they flagged that. They started tweeting about it, and they let us know about it. The Freedom Caucus amplified it. Congressman Norman amplified it, started getting attention to it. Clemson said nothing. And then a few hours later, to the end of the day, another professor jumped in and got worse. And this person said, in a world of Charlie Kirk's, be a Tyler Robinson, be the shooter. So calling for more violence, like, explicitly. We brought that up. Like, we started amplifying that. We got no response from Clemson until like a day and a half later. They put some mealy-mouthed statement out saying, political speech is important to us, and we're looking into this and this, blah blah blah. When like 10 other states have fired people for saying something very similar in their universities, like the day of. Texas, Tennessee, Virginia, like these are not even, like, some of them not even red states, because calling for political violence is a breach of your contract if you're working for a university. In these cases, it definitely was. And another staff member said something kind of similar, celebrating it. our point was like, look, you can say evil, heinous things that aren't true about this guy, and many people have at universities and places all over the state and other states. But there's a difference between saying things that aren't true, that I would label as evil about this guy who was a good guy, a dad, a father, who wanted to just talk to people. That was his whole thing, was discussion and debate. Versus, like, there is a difference between saying evil and vile things on your social media versus celebrating his death and celebrating political violence and calling for more political violence. So that was our big thing with the Clemson the individuals, is they aren't just saying mean things and hateful and evil things. They're calling for more violence.
Well, it took you guys almost an emergency session of the legislature. It took almost the defunding of Clemson, or at least the threat thereof, and a lot of outcry from a lot of people before those three individuals were eventually terminated. They have been fired. But I wonder what's next. It seemed like Clemson was sort of saying at one point, we've got to go through the process to investigate and to do all this stuff. I mean, is there a next step for you guys to say we need to do something so that it is easier to investigate or what have you?
Yeah, Kev got two minds about this. One, if that's true, that if tenure got in the way, then we need to fix the tenure rules, like statewide for universities. And that's something we called for in the special session, which is ending tenure for state universities, or at least modifying it in some way where that isn't a problem. But I really don't know that was a problem in this situation, because Coastal Carolina had two people that said things even not quite as vile as the Clemson people, and they were fired within 24 hours. I mean, they were gone. And they're a state university with the same kind of system. So I think there was more going on at Clemson within the administration. To me, and I think a lot of others, even beyond the Freedom Caucus, we see this as a massive failure in leadership from Clemson's administration. And I would still like to see a special session to, one, look into that, let them know officially what our displeasure is, whether that means cutting some funding, freezing funding, doing something, I don't know. Fixing the tenure laws, and then passing 3927 to officially get rid of taxpayer-funded DEI stuff across all universities.
Well, let me ask you about, because we are talking about, freedom of speech versus freedom of from consequences, but is there a statement? I mean, can you disagree with Charlie Kirk's views without celebrating his death? I mean, because I wonder what the line is here. If you go online and you say, we don't support political violence, but also we're not unhappy that Charlie's gone. I mean, does that cross the line? Where does the line? Where is the line here?
I think that depends on what if we're talking about, like, whether somebody keeps their job or not. I think that depends on the job.
The employer decides. What the line
it's
is.
the employer.
Sure.
And in this case, these universities are funded by taxpayers, and ultimately the legislature is responsible for all the taxpayers' money that's taken from their pockets. So if you're working for a public university, if you're working in a government school, if you're teaching, I think there's even a line here too. Like, if you're a kindergarten teacher and you're saying, singing a song that you're glad he's dead, but I abhor political violence. Like, if I'm an administrator and you're teaching kindergartners and you're singing them songs, like, I got a question, like, what songs are you singing them?
I mean, it sounds like you're saying the line is very blurry, and it depends on who your employer is. And maybe good advice for everybody is just to not make political statements. But at the same time, this is a country where political statements are almost as American as apple pie.
Probably more so. And I don't think, frankly, I don't want people to not state their political opinions, because it exposes maybe who they are.
Sure.
And maybe they're not in the right position for what they are espousing. Like, maybe it's not a good thing that they're in the positions that they are, and they'd be a better fit doing something else or working for somebody else. Presbyterian College they're a private school, no direct government funding. They had a professor who had said some pretty awful stuff in this very long article that she wrote. People were calling for her to be fired, but they're a private school and they can do what they want. And that's really up to their donors and their alumni and their students and the people who pay their bills, not up to the legislature or the government.
So if you're a conservative working for a business owner that is more liberal leaning, the advice is to go and find a conservative business or don't make political statements.
From a legal perspective, there is a statute in law that says if you can't be fired for simply for political statements. Now, that's not been very well enforced. It's kind of questionable how enforceable that is. South Carolina's a right to work state. If your employer can just say, "Hey, you're fired," and just not tell you why.
Right.
And really, that's the HR advice that's always given to employers is like, never tell them why. Just tell them you're splitting ways. From a practical perspective, well, yeah. I mean, if you know that you're working in a very left-leaning if your boss is a self-described socialist or something, yeah, you probably don't want to wear your Ron Paul T-shirt unless you want to have that discussion, right? That's just using wisdom.
Yeah.
And using wisdom it's something that's always encouraged. There's a time and place for debate, and most of the time, political debate don't happen in the workplace. I think where college campuses kind of get fuzzy is those are places to have political debates. Right. That's where Charlie would have them. And that's where people had justifiably are like, all right, where's the line on this?
But can you work in a place and have a professional mindset, but then go home and have a completely different mindset? I mean, if I put something on social media, but you have no idea, I come into work, you have no idea what my political views are. And I'm not a teacher, so it's hard for me to, but in the case of a teacher, is it possible for a teacher to work as a nonpartisan individual, teach math and go home, but also be online advocating for their political beliefs?
Depends on what they teach. If they're teaching math, yeah, math is objective. Math is like 2 + 2 is 4. Even though there are some folks in the left wing of the higher education that are like, oh, maybe 2 + 2 doesn't equal 4. Maybe there are those things out there. But I think we can all agree 2 + 2 = 4. Math is objective. And this is why this DEI bill is important. If you're teaching social studies and history and even like literature and English, yeah, your political views, your worldview in general is going to color the way you teach that.
Well, let's wrap up on this. There's a lot of fire on both sides here. There's a lot of calls for unity, but I wonder if we can get there. Do you see a path forward for, the country, Democrats and Republicans, being able to come together, to work together, and to solve the problems that we have right now, given just how hot the temperature is?
I don't know. Give it totally honest, I want to say yes, but I don't know if you can really have unity if one side is insistent on saying, if you're against us, you're a fascist. Like if you're to the right of Bill Clinton in the 90s, then you're a fascist, and we're away with you. And if you die in a ditch, we don't care. It didn't used to be that way, and not everybody on the left is that way. There are people that are reasonable and don't think that. But the loudest voices on that side, that's what they're saying. So if we're gonna try to get back to some level of unity, the reasonable people on the left side of the political spectrum need to get loud and say to those people that are not on board with it, hey, y'all got to go away. Y'all aren't part of us. That's not what we're about. So we'll see.
I think we should leave it there. Representative Pace.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's bring another voice into this conversation. I've got Dr. Stephanie Ganaway Paisley with me. She is a North Charleston City Council member, also a Democrat, to add, again, her voice to this conversation about free speech and political violence, all of that. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you for inviting me.
Okay, so I want to start with the last question I asked my last guest, and that was, do you see a path forward for both Republicans and Democrats, liberals and conservatives, to be able to come together in this moment of heated rhetoric, to be able to solve America's problems, or are we kind of in a rut right now?
I definitely see a path of us coming together, and I think that path has to be shaded with understanding how this country was founded in the first place, which is founded and emphasize individual freedoms, and I think that's important. And I think as long as we understand that, we can come together. You know, one of the most important amendments that we have is being able to speak freely. And the framers of the Constitution understood the importance of allowing people to speak their minds and express their feelings and their ideas without having the feeling that they're going to be harmed in some way. So I think without the fear of government retaliation from either side, we can come together. That's a pathway of coming together.
Well, free speech is not necessarily unabridged. You can say whatever you want, and the First Amendment does protect us from the government interfering, but not necessarily private businesses. And I wonder where you see the line in terms of, what you can put online and be protected or be safe from being terminated at your private job.
I can understand private companies wanting to make sure that their employees do not encourage or advocate for violence and that would cause harm to someone. But I think on the flip side of that coin, that private company has to also understand that we live in America, and while living here, the idea behind this freedom was rooted in the belief that open exchange of ideas and is essential for a healthy democracy.
Where is the line when we're talking about criticism and advocating for violence? Because it seems like we've seen a lot of conservatives in particular saying in this moment that you can't advocate or you can't cheer on political violence. But then the other side is saying we're not necessarily advocating for political violence. We're being critical and we're having conversations about some of the things that Charlie Kirk said in his years of advocacy. So where is the line between critical and violent?
I think the line is being fair across the board. If one has the right to divorce their opinion and not be subjected to being terminated or ostracized by the public or by those who are in government that are making laws, has to also extend that same right and respect to those who do. Whether it's political violence, whether it's racial violence, domestic violence, they all come from the same belief. And I just simply believe that when you voice your opinion and you're not inciting someone to bring harm to someone because of their views, we need to put down guns and pick up conversation. We need to put down division and pick up respect. Put down fear and pick up understanding and wisdom. And understand that it's okay to agree to disagree.
Yeah. I also wonder, though, when we talk specifically about colleges, universities, school districts, these places that are inevitably tied to government funding, how much protections an employee of those systems has, from retribution. We saw with Clemson, they fired 3 of their employees for posting things on social media. We also saw ABC fired Jimmy Kimmel or suspended him indefinitely. But all of these things have some kind of tie to government funding or government persuasion. Things like with the FCC leaning on a ABC deal, et cetera, in the Kimmel situation, or the legislature providing funding to Clemson. My question is, do employees of these government-funded institutions, particularly Clemson in this case, do they have the right to say whatever they want on social media without fearing for their job?
I don't know what was said from those employees at Clemson because I have not read it. But I will say this, again, I stand strong on believing that we need to protect our First Amendment, which one of those rights is the freedom of speech. On the flip side of the coin, I'll say again that I don't think anyone should advocate for violence or support violence or encourage violence. But I think you should have the right to voice your opinion. I mean, people do it every day, all day long. And perhaps the person that they were terminated for saying something about was voicing his opinion, and that was okay if that's how that person felt. Dr. King voiced his opinion. Medgar Evers voiced his opinion. President John F. Kennedy voiced his opinion. But these people were assassinated or killed as well. I just don't believe that when you have an opinion that doesn't align with my view, that someone has the right to murder you.
Yeah. I think most people agree with that statement. And despite loud voices on either end of the political aisle, I truly believe that most people in America are taking their half out of the middle, and I do think that statement is one that most people can get behind. I want to ask about this idea, though, about employers, because the last guest I spoke with basically said, if you're working at a job where your employer has different sets of beliefs than you, maybe you should find another job. And I wonder how that idea sits with you.
That idea doesn't sit well with me. I think, again, that we should be protected by our First Amendment right. And again, I would emphasize on the fact that I don't think anyone should incite or advocate for violence. But I do believe people should be entitled to how they view a particular situation or how they feel about a particular issue that's been brought before them. I don't think anybody should celebrate someone's death that has been assassinated or murdered. History has shown us over and over again, and I just named some of the people, that political violence, racial violence, domestic violence, no type of violence has woven this country together. It has caused us to be apart. It has not brought peace. It has brought harm. It has brought division. And I think that we need to celebrate, and we need to celebrate the fact that we do have the freedom of speech, but we need to reaffirm as government leaders, community leaders, ordinary citizens, that murder or that type of violence is never acceptable. Again, we need to replace guns with conversation. And it needs to start from the head. We need to, I just believe our government need to stand firm on saying, look, you have the right to voice your opinion. This is how America was built. Words brought this country together. It was more than just laws. Words is more than just a tool for communication. It is used to debate. It is used to bring conversation. It is used to build countries. And we should do that in a positive manner. But if we disagree on what someone says, or we disagree about a particular issue, how that person's point of view is on that particular issue, the answer should never be violence.
One of the things that I think Republicans see right now is them calling for various people to be fired, or this pushback on speech is, I think they see it as somewhat of retribution for the last 10 years or so, where it felt from their perspective that mainstream media used whatever kind of language that they wanted. My last guest brought up the phrase fascist. Liberals have been calling conservatives fascists in recent years. And the point he made was, what do we do with fascists? Well, we invade Nazi Germany and destroy them. And it's that kind of heated political rhetoric from the left in this case that has created a mindset for folks that violence is okay. Do you see a problem with where we are rhetoric-wise in this country?
I see a problem from where we are, because I think that we need to learn how to treat everyone equally, and we need to learn how to treat everyone with respect. It reminded me of a crescent moon that I saw this morning with the star that appeared to be right next to it. I know that they're millions of miles apart probably, but they share the same light, which comes from the sun. And whereas it brings no danger or harm to each other, they're miles apart. So I said that to say this. We might be miles apart in how we feel about a particular point of view, but we should share the same light. And we should, even though we seem to be distant, and we might be distant, I just believe that in darkness, there comes light when there comes respect, and when there comes people being treated fairly across the board.
Do you think, though, that the political rhetoric right now is at a heated level? It is too high? And if you do, who do you think is responsible for elevating our political temperature?
I think the temperature is high right now. And I think who's responsible? I think our leaders are always responsible to bring the temperature down. And I also think as citizens, when it's an opportunity to vote, if our leaders are not doing what they are supposed to be doing, if we're not holding our leaders accountable to make sure that temperature comes down, then we need to be responsible. I hold ourselves responsible as well. Every election, someone should be voting and making sure that whoever we're voting for and putting in office is there to bring, to close the gap and to bring the community together, to bring the country together, to lessen the division. If we sit home and do nothing, then nothing changes.
Yeah.
So we have an opportunity that's coming up. And if we're not satisfied with our leadership, this is an opportunity for us to be heard. And we're heard at the polls.
Yeah, I think one of the things that you had mentioned is that everybody has an opportunity to bring down the political temperature. I personally think that starts at the individual level. It's each other calling each other out for a statement that's maybe too heated or a perspective that doesn't have the nuance that maybe it needs to have. And so, the ballot box is definitely placed, but honestly, 60% of people, 70% of people voted in the presidential election. I think the estimates for the next municipal election in November is like 20%, 30%, something like that.
And we can change that.
Yeah, exactly.
And because the temperature is so hot right now, the temperature is so high right now, if we're not satisfied with how the country is right now, if we're not satisfied with the potential, our rights being potentially stamped on, this is the stampede on. This is the time for us to open our mouths and open up our wallets and pull out our registration and go to the poll, our cards, and go to the polls and vote.
Right, the silent majority probably needs to mobilize a little harder.
Absolutely, but we need to hold each other accountable as
Right.
well. Like you said, we need to talk to each other.
Yeah.
We need to hold each other accountable. Whether you're a government leader, it doesn't matter. Whether you're a community leader, it doesn't matter. Whether you're just a member of the community, it doesn't matter. What matters is that we're in this community, we're in this country, we're in this state together, and we need to hold everyone accountable.
Let's talk about guns for just a moment because this is always a hot topic between Republicans and Democrats. And I think recently, Republicans are still very much the killing of Charlie Kirk is not, in their opinion, a gun issue, but guns, gun violence in the community is one that continues to be an issue here and abroad. I wonder if you think this moment could bring about any changes to gun control or gun laws, if that's what needs to happen, or is there something else that is driving gun deaths in this country?
Well, I believe in the Second Amendment. I think people should have the right to bear arms. I do believe there should be stricter controls on who gets their hands on guns. People say guns don't kill. People use guns to do that. And I just think that when we're not educated enough, when we're not making sure that people are mentally stable to be certified and carry a weapon, I just think it needs to be stricter laws and how we're able to retain a gun.
Let me leave you with one last question here. You already said earlier you think we can come together. You think there's a path forward. What does that path forward look like? How do we get both ends to stop the vitriol and to start working together?
I think we can start by taking out politics and putting in humanity, knowing that everyone should be respected, respecting the fact that everyone is not going to agree, and just coming across the aisle when we can't agree, that's fine, but we should still be respected for our point of view. I think it's about respect. And when we lose respect on how we feel about a particular situation or a particular idea, then that's when we start getting further divided and we don't agree to disagree. And when we don't agree to disagree, then we think of ways how we can bring that other side down or bring them across to us, when we should just respect people where they are, meet them where they are, and then leave them where they are.
High-minded ideals for sure. All right, Dr. Stephanie Ganaway Paisley, thanks for coming in.
Thank you.